Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Tony, and if you're following me you'll know I'm building another amazing Armortek kit. This time it's the 1/6 scale Land Rover, the Series 1 Land Rover. And in my last film I put together the front axle and we put the diff in, and I had some challenges with that, and I think that's more really about me and the learning curve, and I was really nervous about putting it together because I know how fundamentally important it is. But it turned out really well and I'm really pleased how it did. And the previous video I had my grandson with me, and we built the chassis. And what I've realised is that, I built the chassis, that's fine. I installed the springs, but I shouldn't have done that because really the springs should be installed after the chassis has been painted. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've took the springs off, and I've now edge primed and primed the chassis ready for its top coat, which I will reveal a little bit later on in this video. And I've removed the springs, and I've got these painted as well, so they're all painted up, and I'm using a satin black finish on that, so they've been primed and painted. Cleaned off on the edges, took all the surface oil away, so I've got it cleaned, and I've used a narrow gauge electrical tape, 6mm electrical tape, just to hold them in place, and if you like, to replicate where the chassis ties would be on a full-size Land Rover, because I was a little bit worried about the springs moving and crabbing, if you like, and I still may have to do some more work on these, but once they're on and they've got their retaining plate on and connected to the axle, I'll have a better idea of whether these are going to work. I also went ahead and I took out the short spring of each one, so this is the small of the springs on each one, and there is a lot more movement in the spring. So Armortek do recommend, if you want a nice sort of more bouncy ride, remove the short spring. So I've decided I've done that, or I've gone ahead and done that. And now today is all about doing the rear axle and diff, and then I'm going to go ahead and start putting everything back onto this, but I will do some more painting because the axles will need to be painted. I'm going to paint those the same color as the springs. So a lot to cover today. I'll reset the camera and we'll get started. Right, so we're going to start the rear axle sub-assembly now. Now I'm hoping this is a lot more straightforward than the front, because obviously we don't have the steering mechanism to deal with. So I've gone ahead and I've already installed the bearing inside this casing here, so that's done. I've also gone ahead and I've put the M3 pins in these two shafts, so they're done. And as you can see a bit closer up now, here are my springs that I've repainted. Really pleased with these, and I've taken the smaller spring out, and there's a lot more articulation in those, so hopefully that's going to pay dividend. Right, so the first things first, we have a short shaft, if you like, and a long shaft. Obviously the way these go in is the long one goes in this end and the short one goes in this end. However, if we're not careful, if you don't put these in the right order, you'll have difficulty getting the long one in. So that needs to be fed in from this end here, and there's a bearing that goes on this, which is this one here, slides on. I did have to clean this up just with a little bit of wet and dry, just to allow the bearing to slip over that. So that will go on there. Then that goes in here. We'll put some bearing glue onto this, and that will pop into there. And there's an E-clip retainer pin that goes on this, and that will hold all that in place. So that's that, and it'll be similar to the other side. Obviously the bearing, just going to be test fitting all this to start with. Bearing goes on like that, passes through like that, and then obviously some bearing retainer on there to hold that in place, and then they're in there like so. And of course we have the diff to go in, which will be, I think it goes in the long side, so we'll have to put the diff in as well, and we'll have to grease it and fix it all up. So that's the plan. So we might as well get all that started now. We're going to start with the longer shaft. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to slide the bearing on. I'm actually going to put the retaining adhesive on the bearing, the outside. Going to then slide this down into position. That is in there like so. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the diff in now while I can. It'll be awkward to do the diff, I think, if you're not careful. So we'll get that in. That takes a bit longer to go off the bearing adhesive, so I'll wait for that to go off and then we'll put the diff in. Right, so actually I've just realised that this diff will need to go in ahead of putting these shafts in, because I tried it and obviously the bearing retainer takes a bit longer to go off, so I've got a bit more time to play with this. So just pull this out for now. And I'm going to put the diff in. Now the diff goes in, this gearing mechanism goes in on the long side of the axle, and that goes in, drops in beautifully into place. And now I just need to locate the, let me see if I can turn that around, locate the pin into the slot, and then the bearing is in place down this end. I've already put the E-clip retainer on it, so that's going to be fine. Yeah, so I'm not sure how you would, let me just zoom that in so we can talk through that. So we've got the shaft, this end, it's gone in. The diff, which has got the slot in it, I'll show you that. It's got the slot in it with the pin on the shaft. If you've got this in and you've put your bearing in place and it's glued as part of the static build, I'm not sure how you would get the diff in, because I don't know. I don't want to risk it, but I would suggest this is another reason why, if you're going to buy one of these Series 1 Land Rovers, make sure, please, if you can afford to do it, at least get the motion pack option, so that you can get all this in and have no issues later on in the build. I would hate to think that somebody's bought one of these, start building it, and then if you can't get this diff in because the shafts are, or they're in, you'd have to take the retainer clip out. You'd have to take it. You do it, of course you can, but it's a lot easier to do, I think, if you've got the kit. So that's what I would suggest. So let's now. I'm just going to wait for that bearing to go off, and then we'll do the other side. Okay, so same deal. I mean, the bearing's still going off, but I think I'm confident enough to be able to get this to work right now. So again, I'm going to pop the bearing on there. Again, as before, just put the bearing retaining jollop on. Getting that on there. Just going to rotate the, move that out of the way, sorry. Rotate the diff around so I've got the slot, like so. Slide this down, locate into the, and pull that out. So I've got access to get the E-clip on the end. There's a little ridge, little recess on the end of this shaft that allows you to get the E-clip on. So I'm just going to pop that, just make sure that's in nice and tight. And it is. I'm going to wait till that sort of goes off, and then we'll put the E-clip on, and then we'll go on to the final part. Right, so that's it, done. Now I've gone ahead and I've put the E-clip on here, and it went so. I was just practicing, and the reason is I bought this. This is a great little tool. I picked this up in a boot sale a couple of years ago. I think I paid £5 for it, something like that. And I just thought, what, one day I may even use that. But this tool is specifically for installing and taking out E-clips, and I'm going to tell you, it's so easy. I literally just put the E-clip on here, turned it upside down so that it's got this sort of recess on it. I'll get it the other way around, sorry. And it's got a little bit of a recess, and then just applied a little bit of pressure, and it snapped into it's absolutely perfect. So it just goes to show. I mean, I'm terrible with tools. I'm buying them all the time because you never know what's going to be, what you're going to find useful. Anyway, that's all aside. But anyway, that's in. The diff's moving beautifully, as you can see. There's no binding or anything. The only thing we need to do now is to put the retaining plates on either end of the axle, as we did on the front axle. So these beautifully little machined little retaining plates, and they're fixed in place with M3 8mm butt fixings. Let's just get that first one in. I've already got a bit of thread locker on that. I won't go in too tight, just hopefully enough to retain it. and I've been sort of trawling through the instructions and sort of planning ahead at different stages, and with the chassis, for instance, I was looking at that and I'm thinking that I might do some dummy welding on it, because I think that would be correct, and a bit of research I've done would make that right. So I'll show you in a little while, but I've also done some dummy welding on the chassis. So just all these little jobs, I was sort of kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit with the sort of, if you like, the eagerness to get on with this model. But no harm done. So as I said, took all the springs off the chassis, done some mock welding. It's now primed and ready for its top coat, and I am going to do something a little bit different rather than the bronze green or the lighter green that this came or was released in originally. But there was also a range of other colours, and I always wanted to try and militarize this in some way. So I've come up with I think I've come up with a plan. I'm quite happy with that. So that's that retaining plate on. We'll go now and do the other one, the other side. Just need 4 more appropriate fixings. And I was thinking about, when this is done, I like, as you know, I like to get figures and characters into the model, just to give it a feel of scale. So I looked high and low for the theme. This is another one of these lovely little retaining brackets. I looked high and low for the theme that would work, and I found him. Again, I'm sort of really pleased with what I paid for it. Very little money really for what it is, and I think it's going to work brilliantly with this. And again, I'll show you that if I get a chance today to get the painting done on the chassis. Obviously that will be the big reveal of what I'm going to do it. If I don't, please feel free to comment and see if you can guess where I'm going with this. So I'm not going with the bronze green or the light green. I want to militarize it, and to me there's only one option, and it's also got a very fond and sentimental reasons why I want to do this particular scheme. I guess if you're a Land Rover Series 1 purist, please, I'm going to apologise in advance, because I'll probably get corrected on it wasn't actually released in that year, but I've got lots of reference books that show this. I'm talking in riddles, I guess, but you will understand when I come onto that a little bit later on. So we're almost done with this, and then we can put the main hubs on, and then get some grease inside here, tighten up that differential that we did before, and we'll be going on to the next step, which after this it's going to be sort of attaching the springs. Well, I've got to do some painting. I've got to paint these axles. I'm going to go, as I said, the satin black on the axles and on the to match the springs. So that's them there. The only other thing we've got to do now is put these hubs on, and as before on this axle or this shaft here, there's a flat spot. I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera. I'll do a little bit of zooming in. There's a flat spot just on there, so this hub goes with this end onto that, with obviously where the grub screw goes, and then we have big old meaty M6, I think it is, M5, sorry, grub screw. Definitely need thread locker on that. Hopefully you can see that. I'm going to hold that tight against that, just pushing onto that, and then that goes all the way in as tight as possible, and that's on there now. We'll do the same the other side. Load up the grub screw. Early stages of this build, very early stages, but I'm going to be honest, I love this. I love the way Armortek have put this kit together. I mean, it is it is a little bit scary, considering I've never done anything like this. Let me just make sure I don't lose my place on that. But I am going through the instructions very slowly. I've learnt my lesson by going a bit too far on the chassis, but obviously now I've gone back and dealt with that. That's all in good shape. So I don't know if you can see that the differential's moving beautifully. As I said, it does tell you if you want to, even on the, oh, by the way, just to recap, if you're building one of these and you don't have this kit here, and the other parts I'm going to be putting on, that's because you don't have the motion pack. So you don't get this with the static build. So this is only available obviously once you order the option pack. Sorry to keep repeating that, just want to make sure there's there's no misunderstanding. So again, it does say on my instructions exactly the same before. It says, once the wheel is with a loose differential, once the wheel is in the air, the wheel still in contact with the ground will lose drive. So and it says the grub screw can be tightened in order to lock the differential for better off-road performance. Now, where am I going to drive this? I'm going to be driving this sort of in my garden and possibly on my range, which I'll go and talk about another time. So I'm going to do as they say and just tighten that up. Doesn't seem to have too much effect. I can feel it getting tighter. Yeah, I can. Yeah. I'm not a mechanic. I guess I'm just going to do exactly what they asked me to do. So that's that. That's all tightened up. Now we're just going to put some grease in this, and then we'll put well, we won't. We'll put the gear in it, and then we'll put this back on. So we're almost ready. This is the bag of grease here. I'll just go and get a knife, and then we'll get that out. Right. Didn't actually need my knife in here. This is that's one of those Loctite bags. So I'm just going to squeeze all the grease down into the corner. I didn't put this much grease on the front axle at first, but I took the cap off or the lid off, this piece off here, and I subsequently put more grease in there because it does need quite a lot of grease. So I'm just going to squeeze that in. And I'm going to use a little bit of, tiny little bit of, just to sort of get that and spread that around. I mean, it will find its way around in the fullness of time anyway. But if you look at the full-size vehicles, I think they've got like an area that they inject the oil into the diffs and fill them pretty much. So this is a thing that needs a lot of lubrication because it's got to do a lot of work. So that's that. Pop that. Right. Some more of that on there. I'll pop that out of the way. Now what we've got is we've got this little gearing mechanism here, and Armortek asked us to Loctite this into that, so it presents itself outside that. So I'm just going to put a little bit of Loctite on this part of the shaft. I guess this is just to stop it from moving back into, so they don't tell us. Again, if you're looking for this on the static build, you're not going to find it. This comes with the motion pack. So that's that on there. Now we can put the casing back in place. Let's try and get that to lock into the gear. That's awkward. There we go, that's in. And then when we turn that, I don't know if you can see that on there, you can see the wheels turning. So that's all. It was just trying to mesh the gear together, if you like. Now, one thing I think I'm going to have to do, and I think it even suggests it in the instructions, is to, before you put any real power on this, you need to test the motor and just run it at sort of a half speed, see if everything's meshing together and working as it should before you go hell to leather and sort of, you know, full speed. So you could do some damage, so it's definitely worth making sure, whoops, you do that carefully. And again, another, I know I keep banging on about it, guys, and I'm sorry, but another reason why you should get the motion pack with this is to do all that sort of testing and everything else ahead of, you know, going too far into the build, because if there's something wrong, it's going to be harder to go back, retrace your footsteps, and you know, resolve it. So the plan is to get all the chassis completed, the axles on, gearbox installed. Again, the gearbox comes as part of the motion pack. So again, if you're doing a static build, it's not that relevant, but you know, it is. I say it's relevant to the build. It's relevant to the importance of the build, but it's going to feel odd because it doesn't cover any of that in the static build instructions. So again, I'm waffling a little bit, but I guess what I keep telling myself is that I must make sure that I test all of these things, get some power to the motor, get the motor rotating, getting all the wheels to rotate, making sure that there's no issues, and then from there on, we've got we've got some confidence, if you like, to continue with the build. So I'm gonna now just got to find a little grub screw for this capping piece here. Again, this comes as part of the motion pack, and which will connect all the drive shafts together. That slides on there, but I've just got to go and locate the grub screw. Right, I've managed to find the little grub screw. I was actually looking in the static build rather than the option build packs. My bad. So this now just slides over this little shaft, and this is what's going to connect the drive shafts together through the gearbox and everything else. So I understand. And again, this bit here you will not have if you haven't got the option pack. So that's that, and we can see there that, you know, it's doing its job, rotating everything around. So that's it. That's actually quite straightforward. Now I guess the next bit for me would be, I think I need to get these primed and painted. I've got the both axles to do, and then after that I think the next step would be to start looking at assembling the whole suspension system onto the chassis. But again, well, before I do that, I'm going to have to paint the chassis. So I'm just going to go back to the instructions, scratch my head a bit and work out the next step. Right, so I'm going to start with the front suspension, and as you can see, I've primed and painted the front axle. I've also attached the steering rod to that, but I've kept it taped up because it's going to make life a little bit easier to handle this. One thing I forgot to tell you, on the rear axle there is a retaining screw that goes in the end of this. Sorry about that, I should have said that, but that, as you can see, has been primed and it's ready for painting, so I'll put that out of the way for now. And from what I can understand and what I can gather reading the instructions, this steering, or the axle, the suspension, sorry, the spring suspension is secure to the axle, something along the lines of that. And then you have these 20mm grub screws and these plates, which I've already primed and painted as well, which retain them. And these are going to go on the front. The front springs, being the shortest ones, go on the front axle. And then obviously, once we've done this, I'm not going to fix them tight. I'm going to keep them fairly loose, because there's a finite dimension from in the instructions from the front bumper to the center line, or the back line, if you like, of the this front axle, and likewise for the rear axle. So this is going to mean that once this is attached to the chassis, I need to be able to move, I need to be able to move the axle backwards and forwards and adjust it so that I can get it perfectly aligned as per the instructions. So we'll put that to one side for now and we'll get started. So these springs are held in place by these long 20mm grub screws, and I'm going to have to put these in at a height that makes sense so that we've got enough room for a nut on the end of it. So let's pop these, let's pop the first one in and let's just wind that in. Fortunately these are already black, so that helps. And these have got an Allen fixing, so it makes life a little bit easier. I'm not going to wind that all the way in, just wipe the excess of that off, because I'm now going to just position the spring roughly, because this is what I need to do to make sure that we have enough thread to be able to wind a nut on the back of this along with the plate. So I'll wind that in a little bit more. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I'm finding it, you know, a completely different experience to tank building. I'm going to be honest with you. A little bit nerve-wracking all of this because it is all new, but that's part of the challenge, and that's one of the reasons I decided to go for this, because I wanted to learn and develop my own skills. So if you found some of this build a little bit tedious, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to make it like that, and we will move on at some point past the construction of all these elements, because obviously we all want to, quite keen to see what the Land Rover is going to look like. So I think that'll be all right for now. So I'm going to use that as a bit of a guide, and we'll get this. And I won't, you know, I'm not going to film every part of this. I thought I'd do this step, and then obviously I'll go on and do the other side off camera, and then when we do I'll probably come back and do a bit of filming on the rear axle when we get that done because of the longer springs, and then hopefully when we've got this stage done, I'm just in the process of painting the chassis the colour I want it to be, and once that's all cured and I'm happy with that, then when we've got these done and the springs ready and everything else, we can then attach this to the chassis. We can then do the alignment, and I guess then I need to think about connecting up the gearbox and the drive shafts and all the rest of it. But of course I've also got these lovely little shock absorbers to paint. It's actually pretty nice because you get a bit of a vacuum in it. I had these on the M26, so you get a bit of resistance. I don't know if you can see that. Really smart. Really smart. So the only thing is I found when I did these on the M26 is that painting them can obstruct that lovely sort of smooth. So I just need to, what I'm going to do on this one, I'm going to see the length that required and then paint them to suit. So that's the first one, just making sure I have got the short ones, and I have, and making sure that I am putting them in the right orientation, not upside down, because all these things are so easy to be done. I'm going to just roughly put that in the center for now. And this plate, I think this raised area at the back here actually sits towards the back, towards the drive. Yes, it does, the drive shaft. And then that bit there hopefully allows you to pop that onto the plate like so. I don't know if you can see that. Now we're going to install some nuts. I'll try and get these. I'll put it on first, and then we'll put a little bit of thread locker on that. Just going to dab a little bit of thread locker on that tool there, just to get some on to the thread. Wind that down a little bit. Same again for the other four. So I was talking about the colour scheme. I wanted to try and do something a little bit different, and I've got to tell you where I'm going with this now. So I looked up and researched and everything else, and when I was a very, very young lad, a long time ago, I was in the UK. I was in the Air Cadets, and I loved my time and the experience I had in the Air Cadets, and look back very fondly. And we were very lucky to be able to go on camp to RAF bases, and one of those RAF bases actually had an old classic Series 1 Land Rover, and I used to love driving around in it. And even though I wasn't licensed to drive, I got on so well with the guys over there. They started teaching me to do a bit of driving. So then I wanted to, I grew up, as I grew up and I got to a certain age, I really wanted to join the RAF, and in whatever capacity I could. But unfortunately, because I've got a sort of quite a rare medical condition, I wasn't allowed to join the RAF. But subsequently, my son Ben, who does all the editing for me on these videos and does such an amazing job, he actually did get into the RAF. He served in the RAF. Now he's obviously out and he's getting on with his life and everything else. So the RAF is a very special thing for me. I also donate a small amount of money to the RAF Benevolent Fund. I just think that the RAF is a spectacularly, no disrespect to any other services, sorry. I mean, I've got friends who've been in the Army and the Navy. I have a massive respect for anybody that serves their country, but I have a particular fondness for the RAF, and I don't live that far away from the Imperial War Museum, Duxford, so I'm very lucky to be able to get up there quite often and see some of the amazing planes on display, their vintage planes on display. So anyway, long story, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be doing my Series 1 in an RAF colour scheme, and I managed to get hold of a 1:6 scale flight officer. Now I'm going to have to adjust him slightly because you wouldn't normally expect to see somebody like him. I'm just going to wind these down a little bit, and that's about it, I think. Now I want that to be loose. Let me just show you this. I want this to be loose because I need to be able to run this axle. I need to align in the positions that Armortek have asked us to do. So I might just give that a little bit more of a tweak. So that's it. We're going to do it in the RAF colour scheme. And yes, I know I don't think it came into service in the RAF until 1951 or something like that. But I love it, and I love the colour scheme. And it's a little bit different to the standard olive green. So if I've disappointed you, I'm sorry. But I've explained, hopefully I've explained the rationale behind it. Just unslack that a little bit, so I don't want it too tight. I still want it to be fairly flexible. I'm not bothered about painting these nuts either, actually. I think I might just leave them. Yeah, so there's a bit of movement. So that should allow me to, once the springs are in place, that should allow me to adjust the position front and back with the axle. So that is the principle there. Hope that's all right. So I'll go on now. I'll do the rest, and Ben will probably speed up this bit, or he'll probably decide to edit it. Right, so that's the chassis painted, looking gorgeous in its RAF blue. Really pleased with how that's going to come out, has come out. I mean, it will inevitably get knocked and bumped as I build or carry on the build, but we can touch that up. And I'll just show you what I did. So I've got some dummy welds just on the sort of cross members here and here, both sides. I'm not sure that comes out in the camera. I think it does. Yes, it does. So that's what I've done with that. Now it's time to reattach the front and rear springs with the axles attached to the springs. So what we'll do is I'll flip this over now. Actually, I just want to go and get some fixings. So I'll flip this over and I'll be straight back. Right, so I've got my fixings, the ones I put in a tray. So we're going to start off by going with the front suspension. So this is going to go that way, so upside down like that, with the steering rods at the front and the drive pointing towards the rear of the Land Rover. Now I need to try and just make sure I can get that all aligned. So that's that aligned there. That does work. Let's get a fixing. It's going to be one of the longer fixings. There's a bit of paint on this, so it could. Oh, it's going in. Is it? All right, it's going to go in. It's going in. Ah, there we go. It's in. So that's that one in. And we'll do the same the other side. Just move that out of the way. Just use my tool here just to make sure everything's lined up. Take that out. Hopefully pass that through with no trouble. Oh, it wants to go in. Might need a, just give this a little bit of a tap. There we go. That's that in. Oh, haven't put the nut on it yet because I want to try and position that back where it should be, which is on this one. And these will be the shorter fixings, which will go in here. Again, they're the fixings. These are the ones with the long shaft and a threaded piece just on the end, which we looked at when I put this together first. So just need to move that so it aligns. Okay, there we go. Line that up. That's it, that's in. And we'll do the same on this side. I'm going in with the main bolt on the outside. Again, I'm not that bothered about whether I go around and paint these or touch the heads of the bolts up. I'm not sure yet. I'm going to see. Just see if we can get that to line up, and it's starting to. There we go. So that's it. Not bolted in yet, but back in its sort of the position it needs to be. So let's get some nuts on there. Definitely need some thread locker on this now. Just going to put a small amount. I should imagine he's going to go through a lot of stress, a lot of vibration. So that's that. See if we get that to wind on first time, or are you going to be awkward? No, it's gone on first time. Right. So hold that. Now I need the opposing tool. Tightens that up. That's that. And another nut on this side. That went on far too easy. Do these two on this side. Try not to get in the way with my big old sausage fingers. Move that out of the way for now. I'm just pulling it slightly. I'm just pulling this socket slightly off the face of the chassis because I don't want to damage the paint. That's that. And then the last one. Of course, this is going to be the awkward one. There's always one. Oh no, it's on. Right, I'm going to be honest with you, this is a relief getting this far without any real hiccups. So that's that. So that's that bit done. You can see that it's got lots of bounce in it. Hopefully it's going to do its job when it's on the road. So I'll go on and do these now. So that's the rear axle and springs reinstalled onto the chassis, and as you can see, there's lots of bounce on it. Looks really good. I'm really pleased with that. And actually, you know, painting the axles and the springs, I think they look really smart. Obviously, I haven't painted anything that's got a moving part. I just have a real paranoia about painting moving parts. So I'm really pleased. I'm just gonna have a bit of a tidy up and then I'll be back to camera. But just ahead of that, I just wanted to show you that I have got the movement that I'm going to need on the back and the front to be able to get these positioned in the final locations as per the dimensions that Armortek give us in the instructions. And I know I've only just put a tiny little bit of thread locker on these. It's only because I didn't want to lose the nuts or anything to fall off while I was messing around. So I'm very comfortable with the fact that I'll be able to get those tightened down even more when they're in their final position. And then of course we'll go on and we'll do these lovely little shock absorbers. Once these are in their position, I'll have a better idea of the length that these need to be, sort of the length they're going to be, and that will then help me decide how to paint them. But that will be in the next session. So I'm just going to have a bit of a tidy up, and then I'll be straight back to camera. Well, that's it for today's session, and you know what? I'm really pleased. I'm really happy with the progress. The chassis is painted, the axles are completed and painted. The springs are painted and they're all installed onto the chassis, and I think it looks great. I'm really pleased how it looks, and I love the axles now they're painted. They just look so realistic, you know, really, it just feels so good. And the quality when you hold this and the weight just feels right, you know. I'm not surprised because Armortek are renowned for their quality of production of these kits. Yeah, well, it was a little bit of backtracking. Obviously, I went too far previously by putting the springs onto the chassis, and I had to remove them. But you know what? That's no big deal. And if you are following my build, apologies if I've misled you there, but you will. I mean, if you're doing the static build, there's nothing wrong with that. However, you know, you do need to get these axles installed. So the best way of doing that is to take the springs off, install them as I showed you today. At least I think that's the right way to do it. Seems to have worked out for me. And in the next session, it will be what I'm going to do is we'll align these axles so that we can get them perfectly aligned with the instruction manual and the dimensions that Armortek give you. And that's going to set out the shock absorbers. So I'll get those sort of set out, set and painted and installed as well. And then probably the next thing for me would be to install the servo for the steering, get some power to that, and then just test that to make sure the steering's operating as it should. And then quite like a scary part for me would be the next bit I really need to get on with is the gearbox. So that's the gearbox and the drive shaft and the power motor and all the paraphernalia that goes with that. And I'm looking forward to it, but I'm also quite nervous about doing it. But it's an important step if you've got the motion pack as well, because what you need to do is get it assembled, put it in, you know, install it, and then get some power to it and just run a very simple test, a slow test on the motors to make sure they're all meshing correctly and everything's moving and synchronized as it should. So that's the plan for the next session. I'll sign off by saying thank you for following this particular build. on my Series 1 Land Rover, and I hope you're enjoying that. And thank you also for all your incredible support of my channel, all your amazing comments, all those amazing thumbs ups, and of course all of your subscriptions. You're making my channel such a success because of you, and your following and your support. And if you're new to my channel, please subscribe, because I've got a heap more work to do on this Series 1 Land Rover, and I've got a plan with another tank which I will announce at some point in the future. So I'll finally sign off by saying I'm Tony. I love building these kits. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to our next session.